want to register to get started? I'm sure y'all are ready to get started. So my name is Andrew Barth. I am the Communications Specialist, PIO, Public Information Officer for Boulder County Public Works. I appreciate y'all coming out. You got my postcard, and I'll be the person, if you ever want to talk to anybody and get in touch with the team, you can always get in touch with me. I got cards. You also have my name on your postcard. I'm around all the time, and I'm here for questions, here to help you guys understand and get your questions answered, get your concerns addressed up front while we're just starting the conceptual design process of this project. Again, I just want to reiterate, nothing's finalized. We're not moving in or anything yet. This is all what you see in front of you. It's just hot off the presses for the most part, been developed. And we will be taking this through our comprehensive community planning and permitting department processes. Boulder County Commissioners will approve, the state will approve, CDPHE, Public Health and Environment, and anybody I missed, CDOT, did I need to take a look at the road as well? So there's a lot of work to be done yet. So we're very much in the preliminary, and that's why we wanted to make sure we had something to show you before we all got you out here tonight. So because we didn't know if we could do it yet either. So this is just letting us know where we're at. So I got members of the team here with me. If you guys want to introduce yourself, I'll start here.
I'm Bob Yost. I'm with A-1 Organics.
I'm Brian Toohey. I'm with Boulder County Public Works. Chris Murdo, PEH Architects.
And I'm James Butler. I'm also with Public Works.
Excellent. And so Darla out front, she's our resource conservation division manager. She'll be joining us in a minute. There's a big group of team members here to make sure we do this right if we do it. So Chris and his team put together the packet you have in front of you, and I think he'd like to start by walking you through it, if you don't mind, Chris.
Unless you want to say anything first, Brian. No, I guess you can get right into it. We got PEH on board around the end of June, early 1st of July. So they've been onboarding and doing programming and working out some schematics, and have come up with what the stakeholders at the county feel is a good start for getting this project going, get this on the site. So Chris can fill you in on the details.
If you miss anything, just
follow
raise
along
your hand.
on the packet.
We can hold questions and answers.
Well, can you just talk without your mask? I cannot hear. And so I need to
And we'll back up each of each other so the person can speak without their mask. I think you're 6 feet. We're good. Is County okay with that? I'm going to allow it just so everybody can hear. It is much easier, all right, if we give you room.
Okay. I was just basically introducing Chris from PEH Architects. He's heading up that project, and a whole team of sub-consultants, including Bob, SCS Engineering, who has worked on these compost facilities all over the country, and various other sub-consultants, civil, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Andrew.
You got it, Chris.
All right. It's better. Chris Murdo, PEH Architects. We're heading up a team of over a dozen consultants on this project to help us through the process.
What all consultants?
Well, I'm not going to name all the dozen, but I'll name you the big players. Bob, A-1 Organics, he's our operations consultant on the project. We've also got SCS Engineers, national consultant with the Denver office. There are two major players. Then we've got all the rest. We have structural, civil, electrical, mechanical. I mean, there's a whole host of consultants here, but A1 and SCS are the two main consultants we've got helping us.
Who's doing your geotech?
Geotech is Caesar out of Littleton, I think. Yep. So, as Andrew said, we're sort of in the schematic design process now. We have a long ways to go on this as we continue to develop the design and get the approvals that are needed for this. Lots of approvals needed on this. But what we've got here, that I think I made enough for everybody, hopefully made enough for everybody, but it represents our efforts thus far, and it is schematic. We have several iterations of design that have to happen, several approvals, but I'll take you through this real quick. Definitely doesn't represent everything. It's the very high level view of where we are right now on this, but on the cover here, we've got our three main consultants, A1, PEH, SCS, but it gives you sort of a view of the, let's call it the heart of the composting operation. The left is and we'll get to touch all these a little bit more in some of these slides later on, but on the left is the tipping building, sort of the heart of the operation where materials are brought, mixed, and brought out to a separate area of the site. We've got the bunkers, concrete bunkers that you see on the right side of the image where the compost cooking takes place. Yeah, it's the heart. It's a couple hundred feet that way is what we're looking at. We'll get to orient you a little bit when we look at a site plan of this. But turn the page, you get to see the latest iteration of our site plan. It's a big site. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So we're not going to go in depth, at least right now, unless there are questions about things. But to orient you, obviously 287 over there, I'm going to hold my plan the same way to get me oriented on the site. But we have a new access plans for this to try to allow the vehicles that are coming onto the site better access. Right now, as you know from driving onto the site, there's a lot of 90-degree turns, which would be tough for some of the larger vehicles to negotiate. So what we've done is we've aligned the access pretty much with this existing road right here, which will be expanded, obviously, for access to the site. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to do a few things with this. First, from this point forward is where we're going to be developing. We're trying to leave everything on that side, which is closest to neighbors and other development. We're trying to leave that for what the county is deeming potential future use. So from this road this way is where we're concentrating the development. From this point that way is where it's what we're calling the public area of the site. So if you were to come onto the site wanting to drop off compost, pick up compost, check into the office building, all the residential side is going to be kept to this side of the site to try to keep them separate from the industrial processes that are happening on this side of the site. So parking area generally stays the same, gets a little bit of a rework, but it generally stays in the same area up there on the west end of the site adjacent to 287. This building, which was sort of the main point of access for the site before, remains that way. We're calling it the office building, changes use a little bit, but we're trying to keep it as much as we can. There's a lot of the building that needs some love, but we're trying to keep the bones. It's got a great foundation that our structural engineers already looked at. It's got great wall framing and roof framing that our structural engineers already looked at. It's going to be kept, the building will be rehabbed for, like I said, that initial point of use for the site. We got some plans later on in the packet that'll describe it a little bit more. But there'll be a residential pickup area at the site for the various grades of compost, mulch, whatever is going to be provided at the site, happening right over here. Some other areas, garden, demo area that the county was thinking would be some good uses of the site. Kind of unprogrammed, but potentially dedicated for this part of the site. So up towards that end of the site, we've got a future ground-mounted solar array that is still in the schematic process about how it's gonna work. But that's the area of the site that we're sort of dedicating for that right now. So that's the residential part of the site. Everything else that way is all part of the process. So we divert the traffic right as they enter the site. Any residential traffic goes up and hits that parking lot. All the rest, landscapers, trucks from Western Disposal, anybody else bringing the raw material onto the site, comes down this main access drive. They check into a scale house that'll be a little bit down the road where they'll weigh in and then continue on down that access drive towards that tipping building that we saw on the rendering on the front page. They'll drop their material off at the tipping building, turn around, back out through that main access point on the site. One access point on the site. The existing curb cut will stay, but it won't be used for anything other than emergency access. All access is going to be on a single point of the site. Once those trucks leave, inside the tipping building is where that mixing process happens. Bob, I don't know. Do you want to take over with this? You want me to run through on my spiel for the?
I can take it too.
Sure. Bob is our operations consultant. He'll be able to speak a lot more eloquently than I can on the operations.
So the flow pattern is pretty basic. We're using a tipping building because it's going to be all enclosed. It'll be designing it with doors that go up and down so that when trucks come in bringing like the main feedstocks for the project right now are food waste, SSO, diversion, curbside material primarily, as well as some, the SSO means source separated organics. So it's not MSW, it's been source separated prior to coming to the facility. So that's all going to happen and land in the, so we have those, and it's also permitted, it's a class 3 composting facility. So if you go to CDPHE and you look up composting and go to class 3, it'll give you all the different regulatory requirements for class 3. It'll take up to type 3 feedstocks. We don't take all type 3s, but the basic one on the type 3 category is it'll be available to do biosolids here as well as green waste. Those two materials and food waste.
What are biosolids?
Biosolids are the treated remnants from a wastewater treatment plant. So your sewage goes to a wastewater treatment plant, goes through a digestion process, clarification. The bug bodies, the bacteria that consume and is basically which is the main component of the biosolids. So it's currently land applied to Boulder to a land application. So anyway, the tipping building is designed to take those in with, I guess, operational doors for odor control, for debris containment, for visual sight lines, all that kind of thing. And it'll take all the mixing will be happening in there as well. We stage a shredder, which is a slow speed shredder that will take the more bulky material that hasn't been. We have a grinder too in the operation, which I'll talk about in a second. But the shredder then pre-shreds the material. We bring in defined quantities of green waste, which we call bulking agent, that goes with the food waste. We develop a recipe that has a certain CN, carbon to nitrogen ratio, structural elements, drainage capability, that kind of thing. So, and then that is after it's blended in the building, and it's transported out to the bunkers that you see on the drawing. This is a system that's called the covered in-vessel system. Its main components are that it has a positive aeration trenches underneath to provide the right amount of air to the composting process. Once the material's in there and it's covered with a gore cover, it's the same. Basically, you got a gore coat. You're talking about pretty much the same material. It allows no moisture through. It's meeting like for instance the San Joaquin Valley in California has very tight odor and emission controls associated, and this system is fully approved and in use in those environments. So you don't have water coming through. All the liquids that land on the site, rainwater, stormwater, that kind of thing, are maintained and managed two different ways. If it's on the processing pad itself, so the compost itself that might have liquids that would come out of it are collected in the trench and they go to a contained tank. That water is called leachate. We call it contact water. It's different from leachate in my world, but contact water is coming in contact with the composting. So it's contained there, and then it's reused in the process for moisture. When you go into the bunkers, you want about 50 to 60% moisture in your mix. So that's really important to maintain that, to get it in there. The gore system, I've been trying to get a gore system on my site for a long time. I don't have the tax base, so I can't afford it. So let's talk about that. It does, yes.
So it's an expensive system then, you say?
Very expensive system.
So,
well, very expensive in terms of open windrow. Let me give you some.
It requires a large tax base to make it profitable.
I'll get in. I'm not the economics guy, but I can tell you how. When I say it was expensive for a private composter like myself that's using an open windrow system, I don't have that.
For a normal business, it's not.
It's tough. But when you have combined with the tipping fees, there'll be a charge for the dropping material and the sale of the product. It does pencil on the size of the facility, so it's not a tax supplemented project. It will pay for itself in operations. That's the plan. That's what we're designing to. that statement was more because I wanted you to know that it's a well-designed, it's not an open window simple system. It's a more designed, engineered operational system for control purposes. So I was going on the liquids from there. Any liquid water that drops out outside that is stormwater quality. So it's contained and processed through normal stormwater processing system. After the compost has been in, it's an 8-week process. So for 4 weeks, the compost is under the first set of covers. Positive aeration. We monitor it with all the temperatures necessary to confirm what they call PFRP, which is a process for further reduction of pathogens. That's an EPA standard that's used across the country for verification of pathogen destruction in any process like this. Composting, we have to meet that in all of our facilities. And then after the 4-week period, it goes to a secondary period of cover. So it's picked up from the first 4 bunkers, it's put into the second 4 bunkers, recovered at that time, and it's in there for 4 weeks.
So when you transfer, how does it transfer?
It's transferred to the front end loader. So the core cover, if you can see that little cover thing, it rolls back, pulls the cover off, we pick it up, and we put it,
Scoop it and dump it.
we scoop it and come right around the corner and put it in the next bunker right beside it. And then after that, then it's covered again. It stays in there for additional 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks in there, and then it goes to the other side for the balance of the process, and it's uncovered at that point. It's basically finished, so we're just going through what's called the cure process. It's a cure pile process. And after it's from there, it's moved into, on the schematic or on the site design, it's moved from the bunkers, and it goes out to the screening area. The screening area is simply that. We take the finished compost, we run it through a series of defined screen sizes to produce certain products that we probably have already been using already. So
And that's an open screen?
open screen, the screen area itself, the screen is contained in a contained screen area for any debris or litter control, stop anything that would blow off of the site. Other than that, the material that comes off the screen we classify as finished product, of course, and overs or oversized material. The oversized material goes through a separate, as part of the screening process, it goes through a cleaning process of its own. So any free debris, or you might have rock, or it separates all that out, so we get as clean a over wood product as we can produce. That goes back into the system, so it's a circular sustained system. That goes back in for the composting process. The screen material is then designed to meet various market demands for compost. Standard compost, like a 1/2 inch minus, we make top dress products, we make potting soil mixes. If you buy our company has been putting a number of the baggers that you see in the shelves on all the Home Depots and that kind of stuff. We provide these kind of compost to them, and they put them in the potting soils. And that's kind of how the system works. So the other site that's on here that you should know about is it's called the wood processing area. So another thing that's very valuable about this type of facility, it's in some places, like in California, they call them chip and grinds, but basically limb waste, green waste, anything that's not necessary to be ground, logs, those kind of things, urban forests, slash from the mountains, dispensable space woods from foothill operations, that can come here, and then we use our larger grinders. The site will use a larger grinder, a tub, and it won't be a tub grinder, it'll be a horizontal grinder, to grind that to a particular particle size that it uses in the bulking agent. Now, any excess material that we get into the green waste side is shipped off-site after it's ground, and it goes to other composting facilities or mulch production, so it's recycled too. So it's all mass balanced, so just what's coming in is what's necessary to go through and goes all out. So there's no excess materials on site. Yes?
That sounds very interesting. I know we're getting a perspective on operations, and I'm going to have a few questions for the gentleman from Public Works in a minute. But now that we're studying all this, and it'll tie into my question later, we're talking about sustainability and zero carbon footprint. But we're talking about importing all these things here, and they have to get here by way of trucks and people and vehicles that have emissions and pollutants. Has there been a calculation as far as the carbon footprint and the impact of the operations, not only the operations on site, but the operations that all the emissions will bring to our area?
So my knowledge, there has been a carbon index scoring process.
Love to see it.
Yeah, that would have to come from the city, the previous.
I can check with Darla because I think that's part of that earlier feasibility.
Yeah, there's been 2 feasibility studies done. There was actually a study like this done several years ago. And I would state that most of the materials that will come into this site are currently going to another site or another direction. And I can tell you which one most of them are going to, because it's mine. But it's 50 miles that way. So there is an efficiency gain by location closer to that was one of the main things that Boulder was looking at when they started this years ago. So that is available.
So you're providing that service now out in
I provide a lot of this service for the Boulder County and have for a long time.
So if you're already providing it, are you out of capacity where you are?
It's not, we have capacity out there, but it's also distance out there. So there's cost and emissions controls and things like that are the driving factors.
So the end users of the finished product, are they more out there or more in Boulder?
End user of the finished product are more on the front range up in this end. We're kind of out in the middle of where Kingsburg is?
Yep.
We're about 6 miles northeast of Kingsburg.
So are you guys going to operate the facility?
That's up to the city. Right now that's...
So are you guys a hired consultant then on this?
I'm the consultant on the design side. So we joined the design team to help design the facility and give input on operations and how to lay things out and how the process works and what kind of equipment to do. And we market product. We currently manage 400 and some thousand tons a year and produce 300,000 cubic yards of compost.
So you're creating your competitor.
Yeah, but we also, I think that's a good question. In essence, we're creating a competitor, but the market, that which is the demand for these facilities is too small. We can't handle all that's being asked to be handled in this state. So this is an infrastructure expansion project, and Boulder County is one of the major contributors to the material. So
When did you come on board for the consultant on this?
July.
Your current location now, what's the proximity to residences?
So we're an open windrow system. We're not this system, and we're like half a mile. There's actually, it's 5 miles from Kingsburg out their site. There's a couple of residents on the way, so it's probably more like 3 miles, something like that. We got one business here. It's not 500 yards.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the truck noise and all this other stuff, what is the operating noise of this plant?
So
I hear a lot of grinding wood. That's kind of a noisy deal, right?
we do have grinders, and I can get you the decibel ratings on those.
Well, I understand that, but this is ag land. You look over there, there's agriculture. You look across the street, there's agriculture. Over here are some horses, and I guess this. And this probably doesn't apply to you as much as it does to the county folks, but why here? There are quasi-industrial sites that the county owns that I'm sure a facility of this type wouldn't be a disturbance, but I see there's a substantial noise level in the operation of this. This front loader's going back and forth moving material. We've got a highway already here. Does anybody know how noisy this is?
I could address a couple items on the. I told you about our grinders.
Right.
The shredder is inside the building.
Mm-hmm.
The loaders that we've identified that what they like to consider are quieter than your car idling.
No backup alarms?
They have backup. You can put up backup lights. But they're different than the ones that you're thinking of. Because I don't like them either. But so we've been using a specific loader that's really efficient on fuel and very quiet. But that's just one item. So grinders, loaders, and the shredder is inside, and the screening plant, there's very little noise on it, but it has loaders in it. Yeah, operational questions?
Well, it has to do with operations, but it's going to be a combination, I think, question. So, on the operations side, this is looking like we're kind of. I'm looking at this as it's all great information, but it's the cart before the horse. One gentleman made a comment to this end of where, what is the actual need? What's the capacity like at Western Disposal, which is just a few miles away from here?
So the Western disposal material comes to us. So it goes to Western Disposal, and it's ground there the same way it's ground here. And then it's on the truck, and then it goes 50 miles out to our site. So that's the same material.
The same materials in both places.
They take their material to us now, they would take the material to here at this facility.
So out of curiosity, Boulder County, if you're talking about reducing that travel time, does Western Disposal have land nearby or on-site to do that directly so that we wouldn't even have to go 50 miles?
Western Disposal used to do compost processing on site.
I'm sorry, could you please?
About 2 years ago, they had to stop processing compost. It just wasn't profitable enough for them, and they had various reasons with permitting that they had to get out of the business. So they are no longer processing, and they don't have any land available that they would be willing to sell to us. We did ask them. It's perfectly located for our purposes because it's on what we call Recycle Row, but they were not interested in that deal with us.
Are they near homes? Are there any homes or farms out that way around the facility?
On Western?
Yeah, the area you're talking about.
It's a combination of homes and businesses. Yeah.
And are those permits that you're talking about they couldn't afford for those permits that they get from Boulder County?
CDPHE, the state. That's who permits us.
Okay.
And then in terms of why we chose this property, to finish answering your question, the county did an extensive land search. We worked with Parks and Open Space, we worked with land use. There are certain regulations, the requirements that we needed in a piece of property. And after several years of searching, this literally was the property that it came down to. It's not considered an industrial use, it's actually considered an agricultural use of the land. So this was the perfect piece of property for that use.
So did you execute the right of first refusal under the conservation easement on this property in order to use it for this purpose back in April of 2018?
Yeah, so I'm Therese Glowacki and I work for Parks and Open Space. And yes, when this came up for sale, we owned a conservation easement on it, and we decided to execute the purchase, the first right of refusal, and buy the fee in the event that this would be the right place for all of our county processes. So yes.
So that was a little over, almost 2.5 years ago. Right?
It was about 2 years ago.
So was that when the process kicked off? Or
it was,
kicked off
exactly.
Before?
Yeah. No, it was about, well, no. We have been looking for a compost facility for probably 5 years.
Yes, 5 years.
And Parks and Open Spaces have been involved in it. And I just want to say one other thing is that the value of this location is the proximity to the agricultural land. Because with the finished product, with all of our open space agricultural land here, we want to be adding more compost to it. It's good for the soil, it's good for crops, it's good for carbon sequestration. It has so many benefits. That's why we, as managers of agricultural land, are really supportive of having a compost source so close to our farmers. Because the way it stands right now, our farmers, it's too expensive to buy the compost and truck it 50 miles.
So just a knock on it. So when that was all presented to the commissioners, they were within the minutes, I'm assuming, that the property was purchased with the idea of being this facility?
I don't know that was in any of the minutes when it was purchased. We often, Parks and Open Space, often exercise our right to purchase a property when we have a conservation easement on it. This also had a lot of other values and still has other values. There's a lot of agricultural land, agricultural water attached to this, a huge amount of agricultural land that we, Parks and Open Space, our farmers can use. So it was a maybe, we don't want to lose this opportunity because of the proximity.
Yeah, that'll all be in the
Yeah.
So I'm right over here, and on the other side of the Lakewood is my North 18, the rest of us can take the farmers down right on. So we've got a conservation easement on North 18 abutting this property. What does this do? What do you take into account with regard to the values espoused in the conservation easement and we're shepherding that by putting this facility basically right next to property that you have having open space value and agricultural value should be kept?
Yeah, Yeah, and as we said, this is an agricultural use. Creating compost.
A little different than we've had.
It is.
Fair to say.
Yes, it is definitely different than what you've had. We certainly understand that. And I would say that we think of it as very compatible with our agricultural open space mission.
So this doesn't jeopardize the values espoused in the conservation.
I would say it complements it.
I have a question on that. You mentioned the carbon sequestration issue here. So at this scale, the chemistry of an organic decomposition process, one of the biggest outputs from that process is the biggest contributor to ground level ozone. Given our proximity to the hill, the circle, weather patterns, the brown cloud, this seems completely antithetical at this scale with the types of output. Has there been any analysis done in terms of emissions, ground level ozone contributions, and the impacts on the local air quality up and down the Front Range? Very, very different weather patterns here than in Queensburg. And who would we contact to get that report if it's been done?
Bob, do you know? I don't. It's a fully contained system, so.
It's not though, because the decomposition process, even though it's membrane, the reason you have a membrane is those gases off-gas through the membrane. So
Just like your
not-
Gore-Tex jacket.
Right,
So,
it's
Bob,
not a
can you speak
contained.
more to that?
Bob, the question about the membrane.
So the question was, organic decomposition at this scale, the output from a chemistry standpoint are gases that are big contributors to ground level ozone. And I'm curious, with very different weather patterns in Keensburg where you operate, which basically blows it, dilution is the solution to pollution, right? Versus here where you have a cyclical weather pattern that pulls those chemicals in close to the foothills. I'm curious what study has been done on the air quality end.
So I mentioned the San Joaquin study. You should go read that.
Okay.
That'll tell you about this facility.
Can somebody distribute that?
Yeah, I can get you links to the San Joaquin study. So San Joaquin Valley, air emissions, and technically the emissions that come off of an aerobic composting facility are not contributed to NOx. They don't. That's the science behind that side. They are, you're basically giving off CO2 and moisture. And the CO2 is a net CO2 loss. Composting has been widely identified as a carbon sink situation. So it's the EPA is one of its major solutions to carbon pollution. But anyway, the San Joaquin Valley, and I'll get you the test. So this gorse, I'm sorry, this thing won't stay up.
Okay.
Tickles my nose. Trying not to let it run. So that would be a great study for you to look at. It gives you a lot of the scientific data on the emissions. And so I mentioned earlier, that study was used and the GORE system was approved. It's one of the only ones that I know of. There were probably a couple others, but this is the major one that was approved to control emissions that you're speaking of.